Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Kicking It with Cal. We have a very special guest today. We have my mom, Susan Denecke, with us today on Thanksgiving Day 2023. Mom, how are you doing?
I feel pretty good. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Good. I wanted to do this, and I'm glad you accepted it because I want to learn all about your life and how I came about and my brothers and everything in between. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I want to know, how did I get here? How did you meet Dad, and where did this all come about?
How I met your father. It was through work. Uh, Pat and I both worked in group home settings with individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities, and I was leaving a job, and he applied for the job, got hired, and we overlapped for about a week where I trained him, and then we kind of stayed in the same circle after that, but he took over my job and I went on to do something else.
So when you met through work, was that like, I think I might end up dating him, or was it instant? Did it take time, or what was that like?
Oh, wow. I think on his end that his perception was I was very standoffish and this was not probably going to be a romantic thing. So it was probably like 5 or 6 months later, we had to talk to each other because came back as a part-time worker in that same agency. So he could just call me up and ask questions if there was some loose end or something that he needed to know. So we would just be kind of in professional contact.
Mhm.
And then I don't know where he got the idea to ask me on a date. You'd have to interview him,
Okay.
see how that came about, but I said yes.
Okay. Maybe I'll have him on one of our next shows to see his perspective. So
Mm.
when you met him, you had a child at the time. So my oldest brother, Adam, was a year and a half old,
Close to two.
2 years old when you met Dad. So
Mhm.
what was that like dating with a child from a previous marriage, and what was it like navigating that realm?
I didn't really think much about it. That was just how it was for me. And I never thought that, like, I never considered like not telling someone or hiding it. Not that he wouldn't have known, but actually, Adam was closer to three, I think, when we met and started dating. So um, I had a friend who could babysit, so I could go out and do things, or he was spending time with his dad as well. So I had free time to go and have my fun
Mhm.
as a single mom.
Because I know if I met someone with a child right now, I might be a little resistant towards it. Not saying I wouldn't, but I always found it cool that you guys met with Adam as a young kid, and it was like nothing, like just very smooth what it sounded
Hmm.
like from.
Yeah, he was really eager to meet Adam and be a part of his life, which was really very attractive. So he told me later that, I kind of proved that I could have a kid. He wanted kids, so I was fertile enough to provide that. So I guess I was good material. I was
Okay.
proven material.
So you two ended up getting married in 92
Yeah,
and had Eli, my older brother, a year later on your birthday,
yeah.
March 1st, 1993, when you were 30 years old. What was that like having a kid on your birthday?
It was the best present ever. I think his due date was the 28th, so that was not a leap year. So um, I was hoping it would be my birthday because I always like my birthday a lot. And if he had been born a day or two before or after, then it would all be his birthday and mine would get forgotten. But we got to have it together. So it was always really special.
Mhm.
And I feel like we both got the best
Yeah.
birthday.
And a few months ago in March, when you turned 60, he turned 30. What was that like for you 30 years later to have that moment of, wow?
Double.
Hmm.
Is that the first time that it would be exactly double?
I'm not sure.
I think so, yeah, because obviously when he's one and I'm 31, that's not okay. I never thought about it, but yeah, well, you feel old when you have a 30-year-old. But I would have had a 35-year-old as well, so that's even scarier.
Mhm. And then I came around a year later, and so there's a little family of five, and you had to make the decision of where to raise your family. And you grew up in Macomb, Illinois. Dad's from Buffalo, New York. What was going into that process of where to raise the family, and what eventually ended up happening with us?
Well, we were living in Lockport, New York, which is about 30 miles from Buffalo. So an easy commute if you wanted to work there. I think I was working in Buffalo at the time, but it wasn't exactly a mindful decision. It was, we wanted to get out of where we were living. The neighborhood was not attracting good role models for our kids, or, the type of kids that we wanted our kids hanging out with. So we put the house on the market and didn't really think it would sell, but 8 days later it sold. And so we had an offer from my parents for them to downsize, buy out their house at a really good deal and move across the country. And I couldn't believe it, but Pat said yes. And then I kind of went into panic mode. Like, I don't know if this is a good idea, but we did it, and it ended up being a good decision.
Yeah, which surprises me that you were the one who was more reluctant to move back to a place that you were very familiar with. And Dad, who out of him and his 9 other siblings, they said he would have been the last one to ever leave Western New York. So, what was that?
That's just a surprising guy. First, he's the first one to marry somebody with a kid, the first one to divorce, the first one. Well, he wasn't the first one to move out of state, but the last one that they thought would. So
yeah.
He was full of surprises. That and his visit to a psychic, that was my main attraction to him, that he visited a psychic. And I thought, yeah, I can
When did you do
see
that?
myself with this guy. Sometime before we met.
Really? Mm-hmm. I could never see that.
He was really excited about it. Had a tape recording of it and everything.
Uh-huh.
And his psychic said that he would move west, which they tell everybody in the East that they're going to move west. Mm-hmm. Whether that's 1 mile or 300 or 3,000. So.
Mm-hmm. And so, raising 3 boys in small town Illinois, what do you think the major differences would be as opposed to had we been raised around the Buffalo area, which is more metropolitan, as opposed to the smaller, slow-paced lifestyle that is Illinois?
Well, we were actually living in a small town that's similar to Macomb, so I don't think that would have been that different. To me, it was more leaving his family, which was a very large extended family, and coming to Macomb, where it was just my parents as far as family, was a complete difference, and something that we both really missed, having all the cousins and his parents and everybody nearby, that we had gotten used to that. So that was the hardest thing. And the biggest difference, I think, you guys would have done well in any school system and kind of done the same kind of sports, but there'd be a lot more opportunities in a bigger area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was 2, Eli was 3, and Adam was 8 when we moved. So I don't know anything different from Macomb and the town I was raised in. But sometimes I would think back to like how my life would have shaped out differently had we would have stayed. And that feeling of being close to family, I can kind of get that sense of it in Florida now that I'm really the only one down there and really have no other family that's down there now. But you definitely get the feel of, missing home and that community that you've built up with, the number of people that were around. So
and I did it so many times, from when I went away to college to moving to Denver and then moving to Buffalo and starting over every time and, making all new friends, and you just get used to it and it's time to move again. So coming back to Macomb, I didn't know for sure we'd stay here as long as we did, but it's hard to leave this silly little town.
Yeah. So I want to get into your line of work, and you are a social worker. So you do a bunch of incredible things for people, but I want to start from your roots and kind of ask, how did you get into social work and where did that come about?
When I was about 10, I read a book about a lady named Jane Addams, who was a single woman in Chicago, and she would go into people's homes and help them, like the poorer families or the struggling neighborhoods, and help them with educating their kids or getting them into school or, helping them with food and all this kind of social work kind of thing. She's sort of the mother, the originator of social work. So I was fascinated with that book, and I always thought that that's what I wanted to do. But when I went to college, there was no social work program. The closest thing they had was sociology. So got my degree in that, and that's doesn't really get you very far in rising up the rungs of, making more money and, getting a better choice of jobs. So later on, after we got to Macomb, a program came about where you could go part-time and get your master's in social work. And I had never thought I'd go back to school. I did not want to go back to school. I was done with it when I was done. And until I heard I could be a social worker for real, that's what kind of changed my mind and took on this part-time. They call it it was from the University of Illinois, but they went out to different areas in Illinois and taught the classes there. And we had it was just the very beginning of online classes. So we had some hybrids as well. And then the last semester, we did have to go and do 3 classes in person at the University of Illinois, which was really, really fun.
Mm-hmm. And so you ended up getting your master's at 47.
Yeah.
And I remember growing up, you taking classes and traveling a bit. And what was that like for you? I know you said you didn't think you'd ever go back to school, but what was just that whole process of getting your master's and knowing you wanted to take a step up in the social work world?
It was so fun. It was like
school is
people.
Fun, kids.
Yeah. It was mature. There was people my age. There was a lot of people who were just getting out of their bachelor's degrees who were going straight into their master's program. So I felt like I had some wisdom that they didn't and experience. So that was good. I didn't feel like I was too old at that time, but it was really intellectually challenging, and doing all the writing that you do in a master's program and kind of just putting together in my own head why I was doing what I was doing, because they really emphasize knowing yourself and your culture and being able to work with different people. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of know what your own faults and strengths are.
Yeah.
So they focused a lot on that self-reflection.
Yeah. And growing up, the child of a social worker, I could always remember my mom telling me and my brothers that she can't tell any stories. What happens at work stays at work. And so, she'd come home and we'd have dinner as a family, and I would never know kind of what she went through on a daily basis because it's all very disclosed information. So what's that like for you, coming home and not being able to really share with the people you're closest to what's actually happening on a day in, day out basis?
Unfortunately, I think that just made me more of a closed person than I already was. So like cutting off that whole part of my life from my family is something that wasn't necessarily the most healthy, but I mean, it's what I had to do to work in the field. But I think it also creates a mental burden. And when you're working with people who have serious issues or, potentially life-threatening things happen, and you go home and you just have to pretend like nothing happened that day and go on and go back to work the next day.
Mm-hmm. And does it still feel like that today and every day you work, in terms of like the cutoff from what happens at work and what happens in your personal life?
I think I've gotten better at it, like just kind of leaving work at work and not worrying about it or thinking about clients all night long or dreaming about them or whatever's going on. Has gotten better over the years. But yeah, it's hard to leave that sometimes.
Yeah. And I feel like from my perspective, I've learned over my short teaching career that you kind of have to leave things at work, and it helps your mental health by kind of keeping that at work. And then when you get home, it's like, okay, I got a whole new life to live. And so it's hard not to, because it's just, built into a lot of what your day consists of. But I think as you get older, you start to, try to separate that as much as you can. So I wanted to talk a little bit about AFSP, which is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And that's something you're super involved in, and something I'm very proud of what you've done. So I wanted to ask how you got involved with AFSP and with Adam's situation and losing a son to suicide, kind of how have those kind of morphed over the years from when we lost Adam to everything and all the great things you've done with AFSP?
I think it happened really fast because I was already familiar with the organization, just very vaguely, because I had been to one walk in Galesburg, Illinois, I think 2 years before Adam died. So I knew they had these walks, and at that point, that's all I wanted to do was start a walk in Macomb. So within a month or two after he died, I was trying to get that started. And I didn't realize at the time they usually make people wait at least 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember having a phone call that I think I was being vetted to see if I was actually capable of doing this or ready to take on something like that. So they ended up saying, yeah, go for it. And so that's where we started with the walk in Macomb and building the labyrinth, where we had the first walk. And then I just got more and more involved with the board and going up to Chicago to meetings. And they eventually asked me to be the volunteer coordinator for the state. And basically, that's just a lot of phone calls and stuff on the computer. But it's a contribution that somebody doesn't have to get paid to do. So I feel like it's helpful. And then from there, I got invited to like a long-term survivors conference where I got to meet some of the upper echelon of AFSP at the national level, which is a very small organization as far as staff. So I like that they don't spend a lot of money on staffing. They put most of it into programs and education and advocating for mental health policies and things that are going to help prevent suicide in the long run.
And for those who are unfamiliar with how a walk works, how would you kind of describe what that day is like? Not only for you, who's someone who's experienced the death of a son, but to people who just come for the first time. What is that day like, and what's the goal of an AFSP walk?
I think it's just to be visible in the community, showing people that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to not hide the fact that your family member, your person died by suicide. It's a public thing. It's also where we can meet other people and have support through each other. And I've met a lot of really good friends through AFSP, and just kind of being known as the person to kind of, somebody dies by suicide, I often get a call from a family member, someone that knows me, to see if I have any suggestions or if I would talk to that person or how to get them involved in a support group or in the walk itself. But the day to me is supposed to be inspiring, not depressing. So people can feel, it might be emotional, but it's in a good way.
Yeah. And we've done 8 walks in Macomb. And I think I've been to probably 5 of them or close to it. And every time I go, it's just, it makes you realize that there's other people out there who struggle with the same things you do. And it is very inspiring to see not only the guest speakers give speeches about their stories and, you know, the impact that the people have made on them, but just to see everyone there together wearing the beads. I've got my AFSP crew neck on right now. I think it's just incredible. I was able to raise over $1,000 this year, and that's been the most I've ever done. So shout out to everybody who helped me achieve that goal. And I just think
it's so awesome to keep having that support year after year. It really makes you feel like you're not forgotten and your person's not forgotten.
Yeah. And I get donations from the same friends each year that, you know, they just know how much it means to our family. And it's just incredible to see the support, and to help even just one person is going to be life-changing. So we are all home at Thanksgiving right now. So it's been a little crazy these last 2 games, playing games, eating turkey, watching football. I just kind of wanted to know from your perspective, what's the feeling like of having your sons and family and sister and everybody home for the holidays? What's that like at this point in your life?
Oh, it's just like the best sleep, knowing everybody's in the house or they're going to be home by 5 a.m. or whenever they roll in, or they're in the back room till 5 a.m. playing games and laughing and eating. And it just feels good to have a place that people want to come back to and be with each other.
Yeah. And it's so comfortable here. Like last night we got home extremely late and had a bunch of friends over. And at that point, maybe when I was younger, I would have said like, hey, we got to be quiet. My parents are sleeping. And now it's like, you would almost, if you heard people back there at 4 a.m, like, just like, like, that's awesome. Like, this doesn't happen very often. And it just, I don't know, it's fun. So we're glad to be here too. And it's always a good place to come home to. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And
this old house has seen a lot of good times.
It has. And as you know, I like to end the podcast with one thing on your mind. So whether that's a book, podcast, documentary, something you're into, a hobby, what's something that Susan Denecke is up to or into these days?
Okay. I was going to say gratitude for Thanksgiving, and just in general, gratitude is a really good way to think positively and put negativity out of your mind. Just think about what you're grateful for. But thinking about this podcast on connective parenting, and it's on Instagram. I follow a woman on Instagram, and she does not believe in any consequences or rewards, but in connecting and like modeling, managing your emotions for your child and being there with them through their emotions. And it's just a really interesting concept to me. I don't know if I buy in all the way, but I like what she has to say. And I think I wish that I had known more about that when I was raising my kids. So as a therapist, it's just another tool that I'm kind of using with some of my parents to help them with their kids. Think about, how they're projecting their feelings is how their kids are going to express their feelings. So if a kid's having a meltdown and the parent is feeding into it and escalating it, that's just not going to be helpful to anyone. So connective parenting is my new thing right now.
Okay. You heard it here first, folks. Connective parenting. Thank you so much for coming on the pod, Mom. We appreciate it.
You.
Love you too.